where players have done tens of thousands of runs each, taking time off in big chunks was pretty much out of the question. But incredibly, just 3 weeks after his 15-16, Aki was in position to do just that. As always, it came down to the BLJs. No pressure. This was it. An unbelievable chance to make history. He just had to make it through Bowser in the Sky, hit all 3 of the throws, and he'd be golden.
マジかよ、これマジで俺やったぞ。やったー、これやべえ。おいみんなこれやべえぞ。
A 15:08 was the largest cut off the record in more than 3.5 years. A near perfect run from start to finish. The mistakes in Hazy Maze Cave and Fire Sea were cleaned up, and his movement overall was optimized for time saves too. As you'd expect, this run stayed at the top of the leaderboard for a long time. 6 months later, it was still in first. Second place was 8 seconds behind. Nobody was getting close to it. To have a realistic chance at beating this, you'd need new strats. The old ones had just about completely been optimized. As good as Aki was, it would help to change his approach if he wanted to take the record under 15:08. So, as 2019 came around, he looked into what else he could do to save time. First, there was Cannonless. Texture setup was great, but it lost a few seconds over just running at the wall and praying. So, Aki decided that he needed to give up the consistency of the setup and go back to normal Cannonless. The same awful, brutal trick that killed 2/3 of all runs years prior. This was obviously a really tough move, but the run was getting so optimized that it was worth it. Second, Aki went for a faster setup for Pillarless. Developed by Tama, you would do the jump dive on the hill instead of going over the top. This enabled you to get hands-free quicker and allow the trick to begin sooner than before. With these setups in mind, Aki kept doing attempts. On May 10th, the new time saves helped him be 6 seconds ahead of the record early. He would bleed some of this time in Fire Sea, but good BLJs kept him well ahead. 3 Bowser throws later, Aki had done it again.
ごめん、ちょっとぞ。世界。よっしゃ、次14いくぞ。よっしゃ、次14いってやるからな。
Incredibly, this record put Aki 12 seconds ahead of anyone else on the leaderboard. And he didn't stop there. He kept doing attempts for a lower record. He even had paces multiple seconds ahead of the 15:04, but every time, something would kill it. But in late 2019, Aki would finally get some competition at the top of the leaderboard. And this particular runner certainly had credentials. He was both the 0-star and 1-star record holder. He was one of the best in the world at optimizing fast movements. And his name was Dowski. Dowski had previously held the 16-star record before, getting a 15-16 the day before Aki got his incredible 15:08. However, this time he wanted something more, a record that would last for a while. Even though his personal best was a few seconds behind Aki, he knew he had the skill to keep up with him. So, Dowski's record attempts began, and on November 17th, he got on a run that fell behind early thanks to missing cannonless on the first try. However, he more than made up that time with a faster fire seat, including a different strategy at the end where he avoided jumping on the edge of the stage. He had a 4-second lead over the record. This actually had sub-15 potential. But as always, the BLJs stood in the way. They weren't great, but his best possible time was still 1 second ahead of the record. If he could tear through the stage, he'd have a chance.
I don't think I got it.
As it turns out, it would be record by just over 1/10 of a second. For the first time in a year, Aki was no longer the record holder. With so many times being set in short succession, 16-star as a category was flourishing. There was really only one problem. At this point, it had been almost 2 years since someone with a funny username had set a record. In recent months, there had been Aki and Dowski, but to get a good one, you have to go back to Ouija and his 1517. And even that one's not amazing compared to the likes of 420 Blaze It and Shivering Erotic King Banana. Well, in early 2020, someone wanted to rectify that. He started moving up on the leaderboards, going from 5th to 3rd place right behind the two 1504s. And shortly thereafter, he would end up taking the top spot. And the runner's name certainly didn't disappoint. On February 27th, a 1503 was achieved by Slippery Nip. He gained time early thanks to a faster LBLJ, and managed to match Dowski's speed in making the Tsukishima cycle on the platforms. In Womp's Fortress, he gained time by hitting cannonless first try, partially thanks to a setup by Salt and Ginger to adjust the camera and clip in the wall more consistently. He maintained this 4-second lead until the second MIPS clip, which took him 2 tries, but gained about a second back on the BLJs. That worked out to a 1503, just ahead of Dowski and enough to make Slippery Nip the new record holder. The community was beginning to approach a barrier. They were now just 4